After decades of reading, the Vikings began to realize something powerful. Raids brought silver, but not a future. They needed land, stability, and a place where their children could grow without freezing winters and endless hunger. The warriors who once fought only for loot were now thinking about legacy. They wanted farms, they wanted their own kingdoms, and most of all, they wanted space to expand. So the Viking leaders gathered their strongest men and sailed toward new horizons, not for a raid, but for a new chapter of civilization. This was the beginning of an age where the Vikings would not just strike Europe, they would reshape it. This was not a small movement. Entire coastal villages, Scandinavia, suddenly emptied as families packed their belongings onto longships. Mothers carried their babies, farmers brought their tools, smiths carried iron, and warriors kept their swords ready. The longship that once held only fighting now carried entire communities. Imagine the bravery leading behind the land of your ancestors, sailing into waters no one had ever charted. With no guarantee of survival, but the Vikings believed something deeply. The sea rewards the brave, and so the greatest mass movement in early European history began, driven by hope and ambition and the hunger for a better life. When the Vikings reached Iceland, it looked like another planet. Black volcanic rock, holding springs, ice-capped mountains, and yet, despite the danger, the Vikings saw potential. There were endless grazing fields, clean rivers, and plenty of fishes. Families built long houses and farms, turning the empty island into thriving Norse community. And here they created something historic. One of the most world's parliamentary system, the Alpine image warrior who once burned towns now sitting together to create laws. Iceland became a symbol of what the Vikings could do when they weren't fighting. They could build a society so stronger than any Europe had seen. The most fearless among them did not stop at Iceland. They pushed further west and discovered a world even harsher, Greenland. Frozen oceans, icy winds, and almost no fertile soil. Most people would run from such a place, but not the Vikings. They carved out farms on tiny patches of Greenland, hunted seals and whales for food, and built wooden churches that still stand today. Their courage was unbelievable, and from this frozen age of life, the Vikings would take one more unimaginable step toward a continent no Europe had ever seen. Leif Erikson's voyage remains one of the greatest feats of exploration in human history. His crews sailed through deadly storms, freezing winds, and darkness until one morning they saw it. A new land, Vinland. Forests so thick, so you could not see sunlight, wild gaps growing naturally, animals they had never seen. The Vikings built huts, explored rivers, and tried to build a settlement. But the distance from home, the harsh winters, and conflict with native tribes make it impossible to stay. Still, they were the first European to set foot in North America centuries before Columbus even touched a ship. While explorers went west, Europe was facing a nightmare. Entire Viking fleets, sometimes 50 or 100 longships, sailed down the rivers and coastlines. Their tactics were terrifyingly effective. Fast attacks, suddenly landings, and the ability to disappear before armies could respond. But a power shift was happening. These weren't hit and run raid anymore. The Vikings started calmly territory. They built winter camps, fortifications, and bases. Europe realized that the Vikings weren't not going home anywhere. They were staying. England was hit the hardest. After years of war, the Vikings captured huge areas of land. They brought their own laws, their own customs, their own gods. Markets filled with traders speaking Old Norse. Farmers plowed the land using tools forged in Scandinavia. Children grew up with Norse and English words mixing into one language. And Danelaw was more than territory, it was a proof that the Vikings could rule as effectively as European kingdom. They were no longer outsiders, they were part of the land. With each new settlement, Viking culture spread deeper into Europe. They introduced advanced shipbuilding, metalwork, trading networks, and even their unique storytelling traditions. They brought ideas about law, honor, and loyalty that shaped future governments. Even today, we use Norse words constantly, words like anger, sky, egg, knife. These are Viking fingerprints on modern life across Europe. Their influence was becoming so strong that cultures began blending in ways historians still study today. It sounds impossible, but the Vikings actually became kings. Their leaders married into royal families in England, France, Ireland, and even parts of Russia. Their descendants wore crowns, ruled kingdoms, commanded armies. They very people who once stormed castles were now sitting inside them as rulers. It was one of the greatest transformations in medieval history. The Viking Age was not just a time of violence, it was a part of political rise, and Europe was reshaped by it. By the late 10th century, the Vikings world had reached its peak. They controlled land from North America to Russia. They ruled seas, kingdoms, trade routes, and cultures. But with this rise came new challenges. Christianity was spreading, old traditions were fading, and the powerful new kingdoms was rising. Scandinavia itself, the Viking world was about to change forever. In part 3, we witnessed the final transformation, how the Viking Age ended, and how their legacy lived on long after their long ships sailed.